After a brief respite for holiday shenanigans, I have started back on putting the spit and polish onto this old girl. I had mentioned in an earlier video that I wanted to do some electroplating for some of the hardware, particularly those bits that require periodic adjustment. Using paint would mean chowdering up the surface with wrenches, and I fear my vanity couldn't bear the strain. First thing was, however, to get the hardware pieces ready. They needed to be completely rust, grease, and paint-free, or the zinc plating would fail. I chased each threaded section with either a tap or a die. Most of the bolts and nuts came apart easily enough, but there were a few holdouts that gave me absolute fits. A couple of the really rusty bolts that cleaned up okay on the wire wheel had moderate thread deformation, and so they had to be recut. For the adjustment nuts that simply would not break free, I used heat and penetrating oil. One particularly stuck fastener was left overnight with oil puddled up in the top. A combination of persuasion, hammering, some cursing, and pillow talk eventually coaxed it free. don't even want to know what this goop was down in the end of this nut. Getting the plating solution ready required a clean jar and 1 gallon of standard household vinegar. This has 5% acidity level. To the gallon of vinegar, I added approximately 6 ounces of magnesium sulfate, which is commonly available as Epsom salts. You can dissolve the Epsom salt crystals with copious amounts of stirring, but I have a small magnetic stirrer which worked pretty well for this purpose. It has a small magnetic pill which is sealed in PVC plastic that you drop down into the solution, and then the base pulsates a magnetic field to spin the pill. This was after a few minutes of mixing, and as you can see there's still some undissolved crystals floating around. Just get them all dissolved before you start the next step. While mixing, a small bubble vortex formed on the surface, which is kind of cool. And yes, I am easily amused. Don't judge. For the anodes, I used strips of zinc that are designed to be installed at the top of a pitched roof. The idea is that rainwater will run down the roof, carrying small amounts of dissolved zinc and prevent mold or algae growth. For my purposes, it was an inexpensive and relatively pure source of the metal. The zinc came in a roll that I cut with tin snips, but it was coated with some kind of oil, which before plating I stripped off with mineral spirits and then a clear water wash. When getting your anodes down in the plating bath, you want to make sure that there's enough space between them that you can suspend the part you're intending to plate. Additionally, you don't want the anodes touching the part that you're plating, nor touching each other and causing a short circuit. You'll need to charge your solution with zinc before using it for plating. To do so, I left the zinc sitting in the acid overnight. You'll know things are going okay if small bubbles form on and around the metal and periodically break free to the surface. For power, I used a small benchtop supply that can drive up to 20 volts and about 2 amps. For plating, I set the voltage to approximately 5 volts and current limit it to a little less than 1 amp. I had initially hooked up a battery charger at 12 volts, but found that it caused such aggressive boiling around the part that the zinc wouldn't stick properly. The electrical connections are very straightforward. Positive goes to the anodes and negatives to the piece being plated. Here's some further evidence of why I'm taking the time to do this plating. This nut was wire wheeled a couple of days ago and has already flash rusted. To ensure that any oil residue was stripped from the parts, I cleaned each one of them in the sink with some simple green degreaser. Each part then got a quick dip in hydrochloric acid. This is to both further clean the part and to provide micro etching on the surface of the metal so that the zinc will adhere as expected. You can find hydrochloric acid at a pool supply provider and some home centers. It may be called muriatic acid. It's typically used to balance the pH level in pools and to clean and etch concrete surfaces. Take great care with this stuff. It is quite capable of severely burning your skin or permanently blinding you, and the fumes are highly noxious. I made sure to wear protective gloves and eyewear and only opened the jar when I had good cross ventilation. After dipping each part in the hydrochloric acid, I rinsed it well using a spray bottle filled with distilled water. Then it was straight into the plating solution before the part could dry and rust again. After applying power, I set up the magnetic stirrer to run on low speed to help the zinc plate a little bit more evenly. As you can see, even low voltage created quite a bit of bubbling and boiling around the part. It was kind of hypnotic to watch. Again, easily amused. After approximately 15 minutes, I pulled each part out of the solution and gave it a water rinse. You can see that the zinc will form little fuzzy looking deposits around some of the sharp edges. Immediately after rinsing, I dried and heated each part over a heat gun. This helps to set the zinc in preparation for the next step. You may have noticed that pieces that are coming out of the bath have a rough texture. To smooth and polish them, you'll need some 4/0 or fine grade steel wool. I had initially chucked the first adjustment nut into a cordless drill and attempted to polish it while spinning it. That didn't work as well as I had hoped, so I abandoned that in favor of hand polishing. It takes very little pressure to smooth the zinc and bring it up to a sheen. If you go crazy with power, you'll likely scrub right through the new coating. The end result are parts with a polished, micro-thin layer of protective zinc that will protect them from rusting. I think it's kind of pretty. To further harden the zinc coating and provide some aesthetic color, I purchased some blue chromate solution from Caswell Printing. It arrived as a concentrate that you simply mix with distilled water. Each part got a dip in the chromate for about 15 to 20 seconds, followed by another water rinse, and then another drying cycle over the heat gun. After chromate, the result is an attractive, iridescent kind of bluish color that's imparted into the zinc layer. For the planer's 2 column tie rods, I decided to plate them as well instead of painting. They receive a fair bit of bumping and abuse, and I just suspect paint won't last very long. As with the other hardware pieces, I wire wheeled the rods to remove rust and surface debris, and then followed that up with a dip in the hydrochloric acid. Unlike the other parts, however, the plating would have to be done in 2 passes, as I didn't have a submersion tank big enough to hold them. To suspend the rods in the jar, I used a pair of vice grips with the ground lead from the power supply attached to the pliers. When the first half came out of the solution, there was a fairly strong demarcation line between the raw metal and the plating, along with some flash rust that had already taken place. I made a pass over that area with the wire wheel to kind of feather the plating and again strip off whatever rust had accumulated. When dipping into the acid bath, I tried to just ease up on that plating line without going over it. The second half could then be plated, along with, again, a water rinse and a heated dry cycle. ends of the rods didn't get initially plated because they were pressed against the bottom of the jar. So I went ahead and temporarily propped them up in the solution facing an anode and plated for another 5 minutes or so just to coat the ends. As you can see, they polished up really nicely. In this side-by-side, you can see the difference between the unplated bolt and the plated and chromated version. On the tie rods, the plated piece is on the top and the unplated is on the bottom. And you can certainly tell that there's some difference there. For fasteners that wouldn't be seen, I didn't bother with doing the polish and the cadmium coating, and I just left them rough. This video is already getting a bit long, so I think I'm going to go ahead and close this one out. Planer assembly itself is already well underway, so the next video should show some real progress.